As an artist, Sarah Platt makes lots of choices. From paint colors and designs to the meaning of each piece, these choices are all part of the artistic process when it comes to a craft that originated outside of the U.S.
Barn quilting actually is an art form that's probably about 300 years old. It came from immigrants from Europe. They brought the idea over here, but it didn't gain popularity until 2001, when a woman was inspired by her own mother to make her barn look more beautiful. Her mother was a quilter, and so she took that concept and used it to paint a design, a quilt design on her barn. I didn't know anything about it until my principal came to me and said, "Hey, do you know what barn quilts are?" And I had no idea. So she started telling me about some in the area that she had seen, and I looked it up and I painted my first barn quilt.
It ignited a fresh kind of art class at Herman DeKalb Central School, where seniors come to the table with barn quilt design ideas. With great patience, they take to the boards, creating pieces with meaning and gifting their final products to friends and family.
This is my first year taking barn quilting, and I like this class because it's really satisfying to see the finished product. I created a barn quilt that was for my grandma, and it was a bluebird. I picked a bluebird because that's just what my family thinks about. Whenever we see one, we think, oh, that's our grandma coming to visit us.
Barn quilts have somewhat of a geometrical pattern because they are images that quilters would make. Anything that you can make out of fabric, they've taken to the idea of you can make them into barn quilts. So there's very traditional barn quilt patterns made after sewing patterns, like a pinwheel or a mariner's compass, but it's really up to the designer. So as barn quilts have become more popular, people have taken them different directions. The main purpose for a barn quilt, not only for decorative reasons, because paint was very expensive when they first were coming to the area, was to show people where a family was located, or a crossroads between a certain road so people traveling could find your home. But now they've just grown into a popular design to tell somebody about who you are. So the animals have come into play, like horses and cows.
A quiet drive down a long back road can reveal the likes of dozens of different barn quilts.
There are barn quilt trails over multiple states, and at one point there were over 7,000 barn quilts being displayed that were on an active barn quilt map.
We've been getting a lot of tourists into Hammond. A lot of people come, they're driving the barn quilt trail, then they look for a place for lunch, then they look for a place for dinner, then they visit the gift shops and the farmer's market, and we're a magnet for people driving the barn quilt trail, people who love quilting and people who love celebrations of rural beauty.
People like Sarah Platt. While those taking in various pieces on back roads may not realize what goes into making a piece, Sarah certainly does.
Traditional barn quilts are 8 foot by 8 foot. They are done on two pieces of plywood that are put side by side. However, with popularity, people have wanted them smaller. Not everybody can host a humongous barn quilt on the side of their house. So sizes range from 2 by 2 to 4 by 4, almost anything, down to a foot by a foot, anything that's perfectly square. And you don't really need much. Today they're painted on something called MDO board, which is easily available at like your hardware store. And some people prefer to just do it by hand or use tape to make nice crisp lines. I use acrylic paint, but a lot of people will use house paint. It just depends the durability that you want. When I get ready to do a barn quilt, I sit down and look through images online and then pick out ones that my eye's drawn to. It can be just for color, it could be for pattern. One of my barn quilts was inspired by my grandmother. When I was a child, my grandmother made me a sunbonnet Sioux quilt, and I just loved it, and I've always kept it. I have as an adult. So this winter, for her Christmas present, I painted her a sunbonnet Sioux barn quilt that she can hang in her home. For aspiring barn quilters, I would tell them to pick out designs of images or patterns that they love, that inspire them, and to not worry about it being perfect. just make something that they enjoy, and that's the only person that they need to please. As for my students and my work, I hope it inspires somebody else to try something new. When I started this project with my students, they had never done a barn quilt before, but now they are pleased with what they have. They have given them to their parents, their family members, or it reminds their family members of something that was important to them. So as long as it's made a connection with somebody, that's my goal.
For WPBS Weekly, I'm Jolene DeRosier.